Okay, so I'm going to try to evaluate the 4 rival decks inside the Embergard core box as thoroughly as possible. And to kick things off, nice and simple, I'm going to look at the strike deck first, followed by the hold one, the flex, and lastly the most complex of them all, the mastery deck. I will upload them one at a time, though, as making a super long video with all 4 in one generally sadly leads to less clicks and worse engagement, and I obviously want as many as possible to engage with my content and engage in the discussions below in the comment section as well. So let's kick things off with the Blazing Assault. Our first objective here is strike the head, a kill search for killing an enemy leader or an enemy with equal or more health than the fighter doing the killing. Kill searches are always swingy, of course, and how reliable they are depends on the matchup, but suffice to say, we'll all likely do some killing in our games, and this condition is not very far-fetched, especially with the equal health part there. A solid aggro objective that I probably would keep in even in Nemesis at the moment. Next one is Branching Fate, which has been revamped to be even simpler than before. While you're underdog, it's basically the most basic objective I've seen to date since Gather Momentum or Scrum, I guess. Absolutely no-brainer, auto include, of course, very, very strong. Next up is Perfect Strike with only successful symbols in your attack roll, regardless if you land the attack or not. Another really silly objective, especially for like a 2-hammer attack, or if Mayari and Vexmore is kept their 1-hammer uninspired profile, it is even more basic. Let's continue with more silly stuff with critical effort, which really isn't much of an effort. Just roll a crit in an attack, miss or not. I understand that they want some basic stuff in these vanilla decks. These are a bit much, aren't they? Just you wait. Well, actually not that long, because this one is almost more ridiculous with simply attacking someone standing in enemy territory. Sure, as a late draw it might be a brick or whatever, but that's just more very basic stuff that requires zero thinking, setup, or skill expression. And to finish things off, strong start. It requires you to have the first kill in a round, and strangely enough, this is probably the least reliable of the bunch, while still being an absolutely very solid objective, especially for a more sturdy warband, such as the Emberwatch, for example. Even in Nemesis, you can't really go wrong with just chucking all of these 6 searches in your deck, so let's see if the end phases are somewhat more tricky. Keep Shopping requires 3 attacks in a round for 1 glory. If you fail that with an aggro warband, you're probably already dead or doing something very wrong. Fields of Blood is also 1 glory for 4 more slain and or wounded fighters. Quite silly as well. Go All Out is 5 or more fighters with charge tokens. I would probably be wary to take this one if I can avoid it, as it is a bit swingy while still just being 1 glory. Not awful though, and if you're playing a larger aggressive warband, it's pretty decent. On the edge, needs an enemy fighter to be vulnerable, not very desirable to keep enemy fighters around for scoring a 1 glory objective. Generally, I would probably leave this one at home if I can help it, although currently it's still solid enough to probably stay even in Nemesis. Denial is no longer 2 glory in the 3rd end phase, but rather 1 glory in any end phase for no enemy fights in your territory. Not terribly exciting, of course, and rough if you go up against aggro that kind of wants to do the same thing as you. Go forward. For 2 glory, I would hands down take it, but this one might be one of those that I could consider changing out. And finally, Annihilation for 5 glory, which is a really bad card generally speaking, and especially now with more general health, less effect stacking, well, no effect stacking on weapons, and less damage totals. So here is what's the problem with this deck in Rivals. All decks inside this box have 16 total glory, but this one has 5 of them bound up in this card, which is a very hard card to score. Sure, you'll do a lot of killing probably, but having a, I would say, 7 to 8 times out of 10 unscorable objective bricking up your deck is not really an awesome build. I would prefer if this one was done away with, and then rather chuck in some slightly less far-fetched 2 to 3 glory card like we've seen before with Absolute Dominance or the like, and then maybe ramp up a couple of the other 1 glory objectives to be slightly less basic conditions for 2 glory each. Oh well, let's move on to the ploys. First up, Determined Effort for +1 dice, for 2 if you are the underdog. Very solid effect, of course, and a given inclusion in any aggro build. Twist the Knife is Surprise Grievous, less devastating than the old version, and this doesn't stack with pre-existing Grievous, but since +1 dice is not a weapon effect, you can chuck both of those buffs on at once for a very solid combo. Lure of Battle is nerfed Center of Attention, but still a very solid push that lets you push either your fighter or theirs given the situation and the needs. Sidestep, not much to say. Amazing, always take pushes. cards, especially ones without stipulations like this one. Commanding Stride, certainly a very solid pick, especially for warbands with big centerpiece leader models. Can obviously be a bit of a dead card occasionally, but still solid enough to include, unless you're playing a swarm warband, then it's not really necessary. Illusory Fighter, a bit of a weird choice to put in an aggro deck in a way, given that the focus should be to go forth and crush your opponents, but it's a very decent utility card. Get out of a hairy situation if you find yourself like overextended early on with a fighter after whiffing an attack, to avoid that instant retribution with maybe support as well. Wings of War is +2 move search ploy, works on charges, so yeah, very decent aggro card for sure, especially for those slower range 1 warbands. Shields Up is a guard token on a fighter, yeah, very boring and seems a bit out of place here I guess, and I'd probably ditch this one in Nemesis. Still decent on 2 dodge fighters, given crits aren't as mighty anymore. Just remember you lose the guard token if you charge. Scream of Anger is take 2 damage to remove a move or charge token. Although obviously very perilous, but a pretty fun inclusion if you really need to make that last effort charge to get back into winning or to score a lot of your cards. Or like in your final activation in round 3. A bit of a brick as an early draw though, because you really don't want to damage your fighters in round 1. But it's certainly useful for smaller warbands for those situations I previously mentioned. Last up is Healing Potion for heal 1 or potentially heal 2 if you are the underdog and roll the right symbol. Not at all a bad inclusion, but I'd probably go for more aggro cards and accuracy if I can help it in built formats down the line. But if you are playing a big centerpiece type warband, I'd probably chuck it in there, as losing Mollog or Black Powder really screws you over completely. Upgrades then. First up is Brawler to deny flanked or surrounded. Pretty strong effect honestly. If it still makes the cut down the line when more pure aggro cards are present remains to be seen. Hidden Aid is kinda the opposite. Enemy fights adjacent to this fighter is flanked. Do note that this means that having real assist really does nothing extra for you, as to my knowledge having flanked innate and actually having a flanked fighter from your own team doesn't stack and make the enemy surrounded. I think I really find it weird to talk about flanked and surrounded. It just makes so much more sense to say single and double supports when you actually formulate sentences, but yeah, I'll get used to it I guess. But still, having that built-in support, yeah, there did it. Both in offense and defense, especially for smaller aggro warbands, it's very tasty, especially for those 3 sword attacks that are quite nerfed now, which effectively turns your attack into 3 hammers. Pretty decent card, right? Another no-brainer is Accurate for a built-in reroll. This stacks with Stagger to give you 2 rerolls, which is extremely useful. Pair this with the +1 dice upgrade and the Hidden Aid just mentioned, and you're not likely to miss much attacks. Great Strength is Grievous effect on your melee weapons, which is now +1 damage, but it doesn't stack with Crit Grievous for those fighters that have that on their fighter cards, nor does it stack with other weapon effects such as Cleave and Snare Grapple. Really like that change, to be fair. +1 damage shouldn't be a stackable thing, and I'm glad it is a thing of the past. That being said, it's a 2 glory upgrade that still is very much worth the inclusion. Deadly Aim is Ensnare for all your weapons, which is in the old rule set a big yawn and a pass. Now though it's slightly better, an option given that defense crits don't necessarily negate your attacks. Still not amazing, but just slightly less bad I guess. Sharpened Points is Cleave, and this is that wee bit better than the last one, and I'd probably include this one. Still, neither of these cards stack with the Grievous or each other, but there might still be situations where you don't need that extra damage from the Grievous and instead opt for the Cleave. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Duelist is push 1 hex, search ability after making an attack. Obviously a very good card, especially for fights with a bit of range to increase the threat range without needing to charge. Very solid, and I believe this kind of stacks with overrun, so attack, drive back, overrun, then do the duelist push. That's pretty wild. Tough means no more than 3 damage can be inflicted in a single turn versus this fighter. So turn is action plus power phase, do keep that in mind. And we've already seen some pink stuff floating around, so for your big centerpiece models it's quite a valuable card, this one. For a horde aggro warband I'd probably leave it out though. Great Fort is +1 health, even better now that you don't need to worry about making your fighters large with your +1 wound upgrades or health upgrades I guess. And paired with the previous one, it's a very good good card, and just the fact that fighters have more health now generally takes less damage as well. So yeah, very, very solid 2 glory cost. Kenai finishes it off with a 2 glory upgrade for +1 dice, but only for melee weapons. +1 dice is not a weapon effect, so it does stack with Grievous and the reroll card and the flanked card, so you don't need me to tell you how good this is. So yeah, that's it. Quite a lot of strong cards here, lots of accuracy, silly strong searches, and a very solid ploy pool with both accuracy and pushes. Makes for a very well-rounded aggro deck. The big glaring weakness though is the end phases and that annihilation that bricks our hand. Not that we don't have easy cards to score, we really do, but the ceiling for the scoring is quite low given that annihilation takes up so much space. Maybe this is a balance thing though to make up for the killing and the silly searches, but I wish it was just done with a bit more finesse rather than just blob in the annihilation there to just take up space basically. I would have liked to see a few searches at least require some setup without making them non-beginner friendly, if you catch my drift, and I certainly wouldn't have minded to see some more far-fetched 2 glory end phases. If we are already reusing stuff like Branching Fate, which is just a very dull card, and Perfect Strike as well, which is also a very boring end card, why not reuse stuff like Absolute Dominance, Bold Deeds, and Fearless Seekers? Such cards are still beginner friendly enough to understand without making the deck too plain and vanilla like it kind of is now. With that said though, it is a core box deck, kind of the first you're supposed to play. I just wish it had some more flavor to it, but yeah, I'm not gonna kick that dead horse anymore. Well, what do you think? Obviously we'll get more interesting decks down the line, and even in this deck series where I review the decks from the core box, we'll get some more interesting decks as well. Do let me know how you feel about this first deck, and I'll see you very soon with the next one. Have a great rest of your day, take care, bye.